I don't want to delay this any longer. Everybody here's on time, so that's great. My name is Scott Pinsky. I'm the chair this year of the Marin Coalition. How many new people to Marin Coalition today? Yeah, we have a few hands. Not you, you're lying. All right, just 2 seconds on who we are. We're a nonprofit 501c3 organization here in Marin County. We're over 50 years old. We've been having public affairs presentations and speaker events for decades, and we call ourselves an organization that likes to have conversations that matter. So you're here for one of those, and we're pleased to see you. If you haven't been to our events before, we have a variety of topics that we cover. Today, obviously, we're covering the topic you came to see, but we've had any number of different subjects that we deal with. We had the new county executive director recently. We had a program recently on human trafficking. We had the leader of the Marin History Museum. We've had Jared Huffman, Matt Willis, Joe Garofoli from the San Francisco Chronicle. So hopefully that gives you a sense of the range of topics that we do, and we hope you'll keep us in mind for future programs as well. Okay, today we're here to welcome Jody Lewen. Am I saying that right? Okay, that worked. She's the president of Mount Tamalpais College, and she will be presenting a program that we've entitled Inside Mount Tamalpais College at San Quentin, 30 Years of Higher Education for Incarcerated People. So we're all looking forward to that. Before we begin, let me tell you a little bit about the next program. That's April 2, Thursday. Here again at the same time, we will be presenting a program called Little Hoover Commission, a look, what is it? Do I have the title? Well, I don't have the title, but it's a look inside one of the most interesting independent oversight bodies. The Little Hoover Commission is officially known as Milton Marks Little Hoover Commission on California State Government Organization and Economy, and it serves as an independent state oversight agency that evaluates the efficiency and effectiveness of California government. So that should be very interesting too. All right, let me tell you who you're going to hear from. Jody Lewen is the president, as I said, of Mount Tamalpais College at San Quentin State Prison in Marin County, just across the highway there. MTC provides a liberal arts Associate of Arts degree, as well as an intensive college preparatory program to approximately 300 incarcerated people at San Quentin. It also provides support to higher education in prison practitioners and other stakeholders, including correctional administrators, funders, policymakers, and media. Dr. Lewen holds a bachelor's degree from Wesleyan University in modern European history, a master's degree from Freie Universität. Say that right?
Freie Universität.
Yeah, it wasn't even close. She'll tell you the name. It's in Berlin, where she studied comparative literature and philosophy, and she has a PhD from UC Berkeley. She was the recipient of the Peter E. Haas Public Service Award from UC in 2006. In 2016, MTC received the National Humanities Medal from President Barack Obama, and in 2018, Dr. Lewen was named a Frederick Douglass 200 awardee. In 2023, California Governor Newsom invited Dr. Lewen to join the San Quentin Transformation Advisory Council, and in 2024, she was awarded the McGraw Prize in Education in recognition of her contributions to the field of higher education. It's my honor to welcome Dr. Lewen. Sure.
Hello, everybody. So I want to say, first of all, thank you for the very warm welcome. I clearly didn't vet that CV that you heard about, but we're really happy to be here today and just grateful for the opportunity to share with all of you about our work. We actually have a short video that we're going to start with, which will answer a bunch of questions, some of which I'll come back to and address in our discussion. But We'll have the video. I'll speak for maybe 20 minutes or so. My colleague Danny Ho will also speak. And then we'd love to open it up for questions and discussion. So, I'll leave it there for now.
I say that he sounded.
So that's a crash course. What I'm going to do is actually share a little bit greater detail. I want to give you a little bit of just history and context of the college, a little bit more about the values that drive us, and also a little bit about our plans for the future, sort of what's coming up. So first of all, and some of this is alluded to in the video, in 1994, Congress passed the Violent Crime Control and Law Enforcement Act, which among many other things barred people in prison in the U.S. from receiving Pell Grants. So Pell Grants until that time were really the primary source of funding that had kept in-prison post-secondary education programs running. And so when that bill passed, most programs around the country folded pretty much overnight. Patton College, which at the time was, and some of you may have at least seen their name on the freeway, was a non-denominational Christian school based in Oakland. They were running mostly ministry certificate classes in several different prisons around California. And they were also running a general education AA program at the prison in Tracy. And there was a lot of interest and demand at San Quentin for a similar program, so they made plans to get it started. And just as they were about to launch that general ed AA program at San Quentin, the crime bill passed, and they thought they were going to have to call the whole thing off. And what ended up happening was that a couple of instructors who they had intended to hire to teach as adjuncts at the prison, when they heard what was going on, that they were going to call the whole thing off, they said, one person in particular said, well, you know what, I have a day job. She was on the faculty at UC Davis. She said, you know, I'm happy to teach for free. And so the folks at Patton said, well, if you can find other faculty who'll teach without being paid, we'll go ahead with the plan. So you have to picture around the country, the field of higher education prison is crashing and burning, and this program gets started with no money, no resources, just a couple of volunteers. They wrote to the publishers and said, this is what we're doing. Would you be willing to donate some textbooks? And that's sort of that's how this program was born, and that's sort of the culture in which it emerged, right? It was just pure generosity and service, and let's make, you know, very, very scrappy. So, and then I guess as the video alludes to, I was actually a grad student in the rhetoric department at Berkeley, learned by coincidence about this program that was running at San Quentin. This was actually winter of 1998. Came in and taught as a volunteer in 1999, fell in love with the program, and a year later the fellow who was coordinating, officially he was an academic teacher for the prison, he was coordinating this program also as a volunteer in his free time. He announced he was leaving in a couple of weeks or something. So I and some other volunteers with the program essentially took it over to keep it from shutting down. So that was 26 years ago, and it's just been growing ever since. So what's interesting is when I look back, you know, back then, it wasn't just the material scarcity of the program, but the environment of the prison, the culture of corrections, the politics of the state were very, very different, very hostile to the idea of education of any kind, frankly, in many cases in prisons, and very, very limited support for this work. Over time, I think, frankly, because people, not just in California, but around the country, have become more and more aware of the financial cost of prisons and incarceration, the futility of incarceration to a large extent from a public safety standpoint, those tides have started to turn, and people have become not only more critical of what some people would say is the overuse of incarceration, but also more interested and demanding around, well, what's going on while a person's incarcerated, and what is the purpose of incarceration, right? So what are we expecting to get out of a prison system or a criminal justice system? Anyway, so a lot of that has evolved dramatically over time. But what I can say is, so when I started teaching, there were about 100 students enrolled. There was no budget at all. It was all, like I said, the donated labor and materials. And gradually, we started to sort of pull things together. We created the Prison University Project, which is a nonprofit organization, actually started in 2003, fiscally sponsored by the Tide Center, if anybody knows anything about nonprofits. And then eventually that continued to grow. We started to hire more staff to run the program. The faculty have remained to this day all volunteers. They're mostly professors and graduate students from UC Berkeley, San Francisco State, Stanford, UC Santa Cruz, all the local colleges and universities. So you can imagine it's almost like we have scraped together a college out of like the surplus genius of the Bay Area, right? So, which is, in other words, it's a remarkable location to undertake a project like this. Anyway, but so today, as we mentioned, there are about 300 students enrolled in the program, and we're offering about 20 classes each semester. So there's so much I would love to tell you about, but just sort of briefly, I think things that we're particularly proud of, I would say the values that really guide what we do are a commitment to academic rigor. We want to make sure students are not simply getting a diploma, but they're getting really excellent education. And like you heard, a critical piece of that is making sure that you're getting to know the student as an individual, understanding what his interests and needs are, learning style, academic or educational background, so that they really can benefit fully from the experience. But we want to make sure that the education that they're getting is at least on par with what they would get at any other reputable college or university on the outside. And then in addition is the inclusion piece, right? So people come to prison and to the prison classroom with all sorts of backgrounds and experiences in school that are often, frankly, quite harrowing, or at least were in many cases very misaligned with what their needs were or what their circumstances were at that moment in their lives while they were in school as kids. And so a lot of what we do is also the understanding of the student is not just about making sure the educational experience is responsive, but that the student support and advising systems are there to really support the student to navigate also the social and the psychological dimensions of teaching and learning. And so, and as some of you might perhaps be able to imagine, we have many, many students in the program who've lived their lives with some kind of undiagnosed learning disability, never knew they were dyslexic or whatever it is. And so, and I think this is not a prison-specific issue, but often when people have had some sort of disability that has plagued them, they've often developed a very impaired understanding of their own intellect and their own potential. They've been raised to think they were stupid. And schools have often contributed to that as well. So there's a very strong, I would almost say, reparative dimension or reparative dimension to the educational experience at MTC. Anyway, so I mean, again, millions of other things. A few areas that we invest a lot of time and energy in. Also, really thinking about how we can facilitate the civic engagement of students. How can we make sure that they have opportunities to be engaged with the broader society? How do we make sure that their voices are heard, that the society, in a sense, has the benefit of their expertise and experiences and knowledge? And so we do a lot of extracurricular work, which is really about facilitating that kind of expression and engagement. And we also, over time, and this won't be a revelation to anyone, have really reached the conclusion that the barrier to work like this, growing and thriving, it's not simply resources, although that's a huge part of it, but it's also very much the way that people on the outside typically imagine people in prison, right? We're really sort of all conditioned to imagine incarcerated and formerly incarcerated people almost as if they were a subspecies or a diagnostic category, right? They're this sort of other pathological, broken, dangerous community of humans that need to be isolated so that they don't hurt us, right? And as you spend time inside and get to know folks there, and realize that they are fully human, a lot changes in terms of, and collectively as a society, I think a lot changes in terms of what becomes possible and how we understand what problems and what solutions might exist that we haven't been thinking about. Anyway, all of that is to say that we're also really interested in communications, really interested in storytelling and narrative change, what we as a college and as a community can do to really transform the way the public imagines people in prison and to, you could say, humanize or rehumanize the image of this community. Anyway, and so I would just say, many of you also may have heard about some of the recent efforts to transform San Quentin into a model rehabilitative program, or institution rather. In many respects, it was already that before the governor decided to put his signature, whatever the expression is, yes, on the enterprise. But what the most concrete thing that initiative led to was the construction of a new education center, a learning center, which is simply 3 buildings. It's kind of a complex of buildings intended to bring more classroom space, more program space into the prison. Literally this month, we will be moving into that building, finally, after a couple of years. There are a lot of details, as you can imagine, that need to be ironed out, but we are very, very hopeful that it will, in fact, allow us to expand not only the range of classes that we offer, but also to serve more students. So it is, for us, in many respects, a really exciting moment in terms of being able to increase our impact. A couple of other things I'll mention briefly, and then I'm going to turn it over to Danny. But before I forget, I want to mention we're hosting a gala on April 18th in San Francisco at the conservatory at One Sansom, which we would be delighted to have any of you join. But the other is just more broadly in terms of our thinking about the future. So we also allude to the fact in the video that 100% of our funding is from private sources. It's individuals and foundations. And in the early years, I thought, oh God, if only we had support from the state and how much easier everything would be. And then I got to watch 25 years of political and instability and, and the economy and realize in a weird way, it's actually a blessing. So in the sense that we are insulated from a lot of the political sort of football playing and, and whipsawing, I'm missing a lot of verbs today, I'm sorry. But the challenge is, of course, then how do you create, what's the model for sustainability for a program that relies entirely on private funding? So we're working on solving for that, but we are excited. We have an unprecedented, wonderful development and communications team right now, so we're excited about our prospects for the future. But what I would just add, just sort of in conclusion, is we've also, I think, begun to realize that part of what's going on here is that we are building a new cultural institution. So for a very long time, our self-image as an organization was really very, very grassroots and very scrappy. And then, well, I should also add the other thing that also just gets alluded to there, about 5 years ago now, for a variety of reasons, we decided rather than remain an extension site of Patton, that we were ready to actually become an independent school. So the other big thing that happened for us in the last 4 years, really, or so, was that we became an independent college, right? And so that it was, and in the beginning, it was really just kind of a stability thing. Okay, we want to just be independent and not have to rely on other institutions and other forces. But once we did it, we sort of looked at each other and said, I think we just founded a college, right? So that's another really exciting thing for our future now that we've achieved that, sort of figuring out what does it mean to build out a college, not just in terms of like your student information systems, but really as a community and as an institution. Anyway, I realize that's a great deal, but I want to invite Danny to come up and speak to you.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Danny. I am the Academic and Student Affairs Associate at MTC. I manage daily operations, coordinate volunteers and student support, and I make sure that the program runs smoothly inside and outside San Quentin. But before I joined MTC, I was a student in the program myself. I came to the U.S. from Vietnam when I was 16. Grew up with trauma, poverty, abuse, and neglect. When my mom passed away a few years later, I felt like the only sense of stability that I had was gone. I didn't know how to process grief or trauma. So in 2000, I made a choice that led to my incarceration. While inside prison, I heard about MTC. They said that at San Quentin, they actually had a college program that had a campus inside the prison. That's when I knew I wanted to be a part of it. So in August 2012, I transferred to San Quentin, and then I signed up for the program right away. About a year later, I was officially enrolled in the program. For the first time in my life, I had access to college without barriers. I mean, no tuition, no books, no supplies to worry about. The college provided everything, so all I had to do was just show up. And when I did, something happened. MTC didn't just give me an education, it gave me perspective. I learned to think critically, to examine on my past, who I was, why I did what I did, what led to my incarceration, and how I was to move forward. I started to understand the impact of my crime and the harm that I caused my community. Slowly, I began to realize that change was possible. The program completely transformed my life. I earned an AA in 2016, then a BA in Business Administration in 2021. And then on February 9, 2022, I went before the Pro Board for the very first time. And guess what? I was granted parole. 150 days later, I walked out of San Quentin, right here, free man. I'm sorry, I'm getting a little bit emotional.
Take your time.
So today, I never imagined that one day I would work for the same college that once educated me inside San Quentin. Today, I get to support the student from similar backgrounds, helping them access education, regain confidence, and transform their futures, just like I did. So for me, MTC wasn't just a college. It was a community that believed in me way before I could believe in myself. And that belief changed everything. And also because of supporters like you, that stories like mine can happen. So thank you, and thank you for letting me share a part of my journey this afternoon.
Wait, come back. I'm gonna let you stick around, so let's come over. I'm just regretting that I didn't take a picture while David was talking. Do you all, I want to just open it up for questions or for comments. Anybody? Oh boy, let's go from left to right.
We have another mic here. Whoops, there it is. It's on, just so everyone can hear. Who had the question?
Red plaid.
Hi, I'm so inspired by everything, since the moment I came in, actually. But I thought there were like 300 inmates in San Quentin, and then 300 students in the college. How does that work?
So there are about 2,800 incarcerated people
Okay, that's what
and about 300 of students.
Okay.
Yes,
Okay.
exactly.
Well,
I'm sorry, I want to add to that. We have about 300 students every semester, but for the whole population, we have about 600 students.
Like
total.
graduates, people who maybe aren't taking a class this semester but are involved in the community in some way. Yes, exactly. It's about
And people take sometimes they take one class, two classes, they still a student. Even sometimes they skip a semester, but every semester we have about 300 students.
wow. Well, I can't stop smiling.
Yeah, this piggybacks on that, I think. It's not that a student has to be in all of the classes or that you have a certain pathway. So it's that you take the classes that you want or that are going to lead toward your particular AA. Is that right?
So the way things work, the sole requirement is a GED or a high school diploma. That's the one thing you have to have. Every student will come in and take an assessment in math and in writing. And then the directors of those, our writing program director and the STEM program director will determine based on the assessment what classes the student should start out in. So they're actually being placed into, and about 90% of students, as I remember, at least last time I checked, were starting in the developmental writing and math classes. So that's also, I should mention, a kind of a critical part of where we enforce the rigor, is we don't put students into the credit classes until they're really academically ready. And so, yeah, the vast majority will start in those developmental ed classes. But if they don't need them, if they wouldn't benefit from them, they can go directly into the credit classes. But they have to demonstrate that. And then once they go into the credit classes, in the beginning, it is a sequence, like reading and composition, then critical thinking, then critical reading, writing, and research, right? But once you get through, and some on the math side as well, there's pre-algebra, then algebra, then, the various math sequences, and then you can start choosing what you want to do.
So those first classes are non-credit, and you take those to get to the credit
The
classes?
developmental ones, exactly, yes.
Okay, and then I just have one comment, and that is that for old people like me, we remember when San Quentin was maximum security. I mean, I visited there. I was in a band that played there a couple of times, and it was scary in like 1980. And so I think the perception among a lot of older people is that, wow, San Quentin is for the really, really bad people. And it isn't anymore. And I try to tell people that, but I just wanted to make that comment that is part of, I'm sure, your public image issues.
Well, it's interesting. I really appreciate that question because I have a couple of responses. One is exactly like you just said. San Quentin was for decades a maximum security prison. And there was a huge amount of violence there, and it was just objectively a very scary place to live and to work. In the late 80s and early 90s, when California went through its whole prison construction boom and the population was exploding and laws were becoming more and more punitive, so more and more people were being sentenced to prison and for longer periods, they started to build additional prisons in other places all around the state. And so there were both more prisoners and more prisons. And when they started to build up those prisons, a lot of what they built were maximum security prisons, much more high-tech, in very remote locations, and the people who had been convicted of serious violent crimes, recently were often housed there. But what I would add to that is that in those maximum security prisons today, you could run a college, and you would find people there, and this is the thing that I find so interesting, who would be thrilled and who would excel being in a college. And so what's interesting, and we probably don't have time today to talk about this, but I would just sort of flag the issue, is that I think part of the challenge, and to this point about how we imagine people who are in prison, we tend to imagine that someone who commits a serious violent crime is just an evil, scary, violent person, right? We typically imagine the crime without a context. And the reality is, if we know someone, for example, committed murder, we know they committed murder, but we don't really know necessarily very much about the person or the context, what their mindset is, what they're like, for example, when they're not under the influence of drugs or alcohol, or when they're not in a rage, or when they don't think they're being threatened. Again, not to mitigate the seriousness of the crime, but you find even within that serious, violent, criminal population, all kinds of people who, this is not how they pictured their life. This is not where they wanted to be. That was not something they wanted to do, or something they're proud of or fine of. Everybody's an individual. So yes, you're absolutely right that reputation that San Quentin has comes from those years where people were getting murdered every week, frankly. But it's also true. I would just push back slightly on the premise that someone in prison for a serious violent crime wouldn't necessarily be somebody you would want to have lunch with, as crazy as that might sound. Do you want to add anything?
So I think back in 1998, the prison was still level 4, right?
I think that's
Yeah, but today,
No, not 98.
98.
I don't know. We'll
Yes,
look it up.
at least when you were there, it was,
Yeah,
was
in
level
the 80s,
Yeah,
definitely.
level 4. So it's kind of dangerous. It's kind of a
Yeah.
lot of violence going on. But San Quentin today is level 2. So a lot of people, in there are programmers. They just focus on going home and doing good.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
right. Thank you. That's the other thing.
Question over here.
I'm kind of curious about all the different programs that are going on at San Quentin. I mean, I know there's Marin Shakespeare. I know that the Marin Humane Society has people that are conditioning dogs. I know that Spirit Rock does meditation programs at San Quentin.
Good.
I mean, it sounds like there's a real array of programs going on within the prison. And the more that there is this give and take with the community, the more people are being exposed and opening their minds to the possibilities.
Yeah, I sometimes describe what we do as we're really secret. We tell everybody we're running an education program for incarcerated people, but we're really running a study abroad program for clueless white people. All right, Danny, Bobby, go ahead.
So this is in response to this other program, the other programs that are there.
You have to introduce yourself first.
Oh, my name is Bobby, and I am an alumni of Patton University, right, which came through prison. What was it named?
Was the Prison University Project was
Yeah,
a nonprofit.
Prison University, because it was, I graduated in 2006, so this is pre Mount Tam. But to answer your question is, that's one of the things that are unique about the college program is understanding. They bring an understanding and a student-centered kind of wraparound. Because education for me gave me a sense of self-worth, right? It gave me confidence and also exposure to how I'm going to operate in my future. So along with that, there was this biopsychosocial kind of thing going on with church, right? With my job, and I worked in education as a tutor there. There was domestic violence courses to corrupt, there was anger management. There's, all those programs that you said, they're still bringing music in there all the time, and this kind of need that to meet, because, when we're inside of prison, one of the things is isolation, right? And in isolation, I only think about the tools that I had limited. I had one tool, a hammer probably, and I wasn't exposed to things that allowed me to have options. And so I can think now. So going to the college, it helped me think about what else do I need? What other kind of, like Danny talked about, that kind of revealing the doors that are opened up. And so that happens in San Quentin. That's one of the unique things about San Quentin that hopefully will spread through other colleges.
Well, and I just want to add to that too. So Bobby worked with a couple of folks from the outside on this, really built a GED tutoring program that was peer-driven. I mean, has left a legacy that you see the traces of 20 years later. So just for the record, but it was a brilliant example of what you're describing, where it's really a partnership, where the community on the outside is really partnering with people on the inside. And then there are so many benefits simultaneously, like Bobby's describing, breaking down isolation, but also breaking down everybody's ignorance, right, and everybody's confusion, but also that facilitating that collaboration also means you're building things that take on a life of their own. People in that program who were trained as tutors also then sometimes transferred to other prisons, and then they start tutoring other people, peers at that new institution. So it's almost like you're just sort of disseminating the seeds of positivity in a sense.
We have a question here.
I'd like to understand how Mount Tamalpais College fits into the greater vision about turning the institution, San Quentin, into more of a rehabilitation function. I understand, based on your earlier comments, that there are about 2,800 incarcerated people. Your outreach seems to be to about perhaps a quarter of them. How do you fit into that, and what is it that the program is doing to achieve the mission of becoming more like a Danish rehabilitation model?
Thank you for that question. I would say personally, one of our great functions is as truth tellers. Like we tend, I think, and one of the areas where I'm grateful for our independence. I mean, obviously we're very dependent on the institution and the state to be allowed to run, but in a more granular sense, we have a lot of independence. And I think you can tell like how easily distracted I am. One of the things that one of the ways in which I understand our role is to really point out the complexity, to be the ones who appreciate the soundbite, but then sort of try to get people to focus on the nitty-gritty. So, and I sort of say this facetiously, but so for example, in passing, I have some frustration about the hyper-focus on the construction of the building, as opposed to a more holistic approach to the prison as a whole. The infrastructure is failing. There's a lot of deferred maintenance in that prison, all over the state, really. But in addition, you have things like the quality of food, the quality of mental health care, staff training, staff mental health and well-being, right? There are a lot of variables that dramatically impact the way the prison functions as an ecosystem and the way that in turn impacts the lives of the people who are in there. I also, for example, a glaring gap is there's really no strategy for addressing the need for quality vocational training programs. Somehow that just got missed. Well, liberal arts education to me is an essential part of being a human, and yet some people don't want to pursue just academia or jobs that require higher education. They want to be in the trades or something like that. So I find very often, so for example, when we talk, often journalists, particularly lately, will contact us looking for input on, well, what's really going on? And so what our role very often is to just raise questions, to say, yes, great, and now what are we going to do about this? I don't know if I'm answering your question, but I think it's sort of a partnership and a collaboration with some healthy tension built in. I guess that's how I would describe it.
Can I add a few words? Because one of the things is the platform, right? The platform, it's different. All those programs that we talked about, they don't have a platform to bridge across from prison into the real world. The Patton University College not only gives men, the incarcerated men, an opportunity to excel within the prison and become leaders of programs, builders of programs. Through that college, and because I was thinking, I was able to do exactly what Patton Prison University project did with the GED on a smaller scale. Take something that was discarded and build it back up. And now that translates to me in the real world on how to happen it. And I bet she'd give you 30 names of people that are doing in governors. They know better than I do. There's people that have been through that program and are out in the real world and having real executive impacts on their community.
Yeah.
All right, questions over here.
No, I just want to add like one more thing to that. Like for me, if I have to summarize in one sentence, what makes the college, a success so far is that we have the faculties, we have the staff, we have the student, all believe in the same mission, which is focus on education. And it's just education alone. For me, education is the door, is the free ticket. I don't know if it's a free ticket, but it's helped me get out of prison. I was able to articulate, to show the board my understanding of my crime, of my impact of what I've done, and my understanding of my plan for the future and how I'm going to stay away from crime. And because I was able to articulate that before the parole board, that's why they gave me a date. But before I went to that point, it's all because of education, through MTC, was the foundation that it gave me the first step.
Hi, my name is Johanna James. I'm actually here as a representative for Assemblywoman Connolly in our state legislature. I just had a quick question, going back to what Danny and Bobby have shared. I was curious to see if there was any supporting resources once individuals have been released, maybe informally as alum networks, of any kind, or if there was any support for individuals looking to come back to the college and support in the way that Danny has.
Yeah. There are so many answers. So we do have an alumni affairs associate who is overwhelmed. We have a alumni scholarship fund, which we created a few years ago. The first year we had, I think, 4 recipients, then we had 5, and then I think 5 again, and last year it was 18. And this year it's 23. So we're doing our best, but keeping up with demand for support, is a challenge. But so we do what we can in terms of supporting people with a particular emphasis on people who want to continue their education, where we do, advising and support. But there are also other partner organizations working in the field of reentry, where we often have more of a referral function, where we're connecting people to services. What I would say is, for example, there's an outstanding organization also run by an alumnus of ours named David Cowan. The organization is called Bonafide, and they do incredibly high-touch support for people coming home from prison, but they focus primarily on lifers. So there is still, and they do an incredible amount, but there are still a lot of people who fall through the cracks. And so I would say that you also mentioned, probably the most powerful network is the community itself, taking care of each other. And you hear people talk all the time, you get out of prison and and I'm generalizing now, but just over the years people have said, I feel like people can tell I was in prison. Even you're wearing civilian clothing, you just feel so different. Like you've been told for decades how different, ugly, dangerous, bad, scary you are, and then now you're standing on the street. I mean, mentally, it's just overwhelming. And what people often talk about is there's nothing like the community of other formerly incarcerated people to just calm the nervous system, to just let you relax and be yourself and ask your questions and not feel stupid or like someone's going to judge you. People are in the supermarket, and they say, well, swipe your card, and they're like, what is she talking about? Or just click, use the mouse to click on, you don't realize until you spend time with someone who was in prison and never had computer access or never used a cell phone or whatever it is, how overwhelming today's world is, particularly with technology. Anyway, all of that is to say, there are very strong informal networks of people supporting each other, but they're not enough. I guess that's the semi-short answer.
And also that's that bridge, because there's just imagine engineers coming from the college program building a bridge through transitional services, through help into one of the links that I've taken that I got hooked up to there is Project Rebound, which was a formerly incarcerated individual, got out, got to deal with state of San Francisco State and said, hey, look, we need to do something. We got some brilliant minds in there. They could do some brilliant things out here, and we need to give them a place. And now that's bubbled into 20.
They're actually on every CSU campus.
Yeah, and that's the bridge. The bridge that you're saying is a lot of that bridge is coming through formerly incarcerated individuals that give me a hand. And I call them all the time and say, hey, this and that. That's how it's working.
Yeah.
And I also reach back to guys who are incarcerated and give them a hand up. That's how it works.
Yeah.
By the way, it's a pleasure to know Assemblyman Connolly is paying attention to what's going on here. He's been a guest of ours several times here, so we're pleased to have you join us. All right, a couple more questions I think we have time for.
As a retired child adolescent psychiatrist, I greatly applaud you for your efforts and results and all the way around. And my question is, what percentage of similar prisons throughout California have this kind of program or opportunity for their inmates? And then secondly, is it catching on around the U.S. or not particularly?
So, in California today, the majority of prisons have some kind of higher ed programming. Usually it's a local community college. There are a few that are particularly good. They typically are pretty under-resourced, though. So the more likely scenario is, for example, the teacher is going into the prison and teaching the class, right? So whereas we've got staff on site, advisors, we are a much more high-touch kind of program, but there are other colleges, lots of other colleges who are running programs, running classes at least. The other difference is that very often what other colleges end up doing, particularly in the more rural, under-resourced parts of the state, is they'll run classes, but not necessarily in a sequence or as a cluster that would allow you to complete a degree. So they function more in reality like schools of continuing education. And the problem there is, like I mentioned, people are frequently so underprepared. They may have gotten a GED or a high school diploma, but may still not be nearly ready to do college level work. And so those schools don't necessarily have the resources or the capacity to help students master the basic skills that they're going to need to be successful. Around the country, also similarly, the Pell Grants, the access to Pell Grants was reinstated a few years ago for colleges and universities. But it's complicated because back in the 90s and 80s and before, the value of the Pell Grant relative to the cost of education was much higher. Today it's worth much less. And so schools that are just relying on the Pell funds don't really necessarily have the resources to do the work really well. Some schools are also, frankly, sort of relying on the Pell money as a source of revenue. And so in other words, the student, and you see this in the online for-profit education world where there are markets people are trying to identify where they can, pitch a tent and rake in the cash. And there aren't a lot of checks and balances to ensure that there aren't a lot of standards, quality standards or systems for accountability. So it's a little bit of a double-edged sword. And happy to talk about that more later on if you want more detail. Yeah.
All right, so as we're closing out, Lenny, did you have a question, or did I see your hand by accident? No? Okay. Any last questions? Okay, one more, and then I think we'll probably want to wrap up here.
Oh, I just wondered if there is any programs for trade to introduce the inmates to trades that could be of great value when they come out, so as well as the education and the improving their self-image and all that. Are there trade programs that give them skills that can be used later?
They are scattered around the state, the ones that are decent quality, but they're quite inconsistent. And what you see often is the prison will have, and not just at San Quentin, but really around the country, the prison will have a labor need. So for example, dry cleaning or janitorial or kitchen services. So they'll stick a vocational training label on it and they'll enroll the students or the incarcerated people in that program. But so for example, they'll train people on like print shop, but the equipment that they're using in the print shop is antique. Exactly. Or, that for years they had, prison industries also had like mattress manufacturing or shoes, where you would have had to move back to Vietnam to get a job doing, making the shoes because those jobs don't exist in the U.S. anymore. So they're there, but they're
Yeah, they do offer a lot of vocation. They do offer like building maintenance. I graduated from that program, and yet I don't know how to build a house. Just to show, it's just some books, you go through the book and that's it. They don't really like have hand-on experience. Electronics, plumbing, stuff like that.
Okay, last question here.
What would you like from the public or from us? Are you looking for teachers, volunteers, maybe money, of course, I don't know.
No, thank you for the question. So I want to also let my other colleagues here weigh in on this, but I would say absolutely donations, no question. But not just donations, but philanthropic contacts or just ideas about individuals, companies, foundations that might be interested in supporting that work. So fundraising help, but broadly defined, that's all super helpful. Volunteering, absolutely. You know, we don't necessarily know, just chatting with someone, whether they would have the skills and interests needed to teach or tutor a particular class. But if you are interested, absolutely get on our website and take a look, because it'll walk you through the process of volunteering. People often don't realize how helpful they can be, particularly with, you know, basic writing or with math, things like that. We're also happy to connect people to other volunteer programs who might have needs that are aligned with what you're good at and interested in. And then I also think, you know, things like media contacts, anything that you can think of. I mean, like this, like you were the one who hooked us up here. Like, this is enormously helpful. We're sort of being handed off from group to group, right? So we met Ellen at the TAM, at the Tamalpais, and he got us to come here. That type of thing is also super helpful. Because what we really, I mean, the premise of our work at this point is, if more people know, or the more people who know, the more this work will thrive, and the more the community that we're impacting will thrive.
Speaking of which, before we go, there are materials over on that table for anyone to grab before you leave, and also there's a sign-up sheet, and what's that for?
Oh, so we can add you to our, if you'd like to be added to our mailing list, thank you, awesome. You can sign up there. We don't inundate people. We send the occasional paper mailing and the occasional email, an invitation to events, or an email bulletin just updating you on news from the community. But we'd be delighted to add you to that as well.
All right, so that's where you sign in and get the information. Let's hear it for Jody and Danny.
Thank you all.
For a very informative and educational program. We really appreciate you coming. Thanks to all of you for coming. Don't forget, our next program is April 2. And it's all on the website, marincoalition.org. Also, I didn't mention this earlier, but those of you who've been here before know this, but if you haven't, all of our programs are in our archives listing on the website. So you go to marincoalition.org, you go to the top banner, and after all the basic stuff, you'll see archives. And that page has the recordings of programs like this. So this recording will be online in about a day or so. And our last program is on there. The one before that is on there, going back years and years. So anybody you want to go listen to the program, you can see that on the website at no cost. So hopefully you'll check us out and come back, and we'll see you hopefully in the future. Thank you.
Thank you.